Hello, my name is TJ Mullen, and this is Financial Abuse Awakenings. And this is going to be my first video regarding financial abuse. Now, you might think that this is not a real thing. Financial abuse is usually accompanied by forms of domestic violence as a means of control. But this is going to be a description of my story as a financially abused male. This is not just a male or female, but I want to bring to everyone's attention that it can happen to males as well as females. In my particular case, there was no uh, physical violence, but uh, the damage that was done uh, is as real as anything. Um, and what I want to focus on is that financial abuse is a form of absolute control over another human being. In my case, um, I had a six figure income, and you would think that I would have nice things and be able to enjoy a night out or get a cup of coffee. Um, but in my case, it was not that way. And what I'm going to describe is a perfect storm. So, going back to my humble beginnings, I grew up in a household that was broken. My mother had uh, split from my father when I was at 6 years old, and I had the beginnings of separation anxiety beginning all the way back then. And because my mother did not have a college degree, we lived, and she was not wealthy. We moved to a state that my other relatives lived in, and they gave us a place to live and helped us out with um, food for a little while until my mother could get on her feet. Well, uh, that was a little bit harder to do because um, she she immediately went into um, college and started a college career, getting um, a degree in biology and chemistry at the same time. All the while we were moving from place to place so that she could attend classes closer to school. Um, but because our relatives didn't live there, uh, we couldn't live in homes that they owned. Um, my family was well off, but unfortunately, um, my my line of the family did not get any of the real uh, hand-me-downs, the inheritances. So, um, I was always, well, let's see. Um, Sorry about that. Amber Alert. Um, anyway, um, so let me back up just a little bit. Um, we moved from place to place uh, and barely scraped by. We were on government cheese, uh, food stamps, the whole bit. And um, most of my possessions were um, cherished. Um, when I did get something such as an Atari 2600, um, that became something that because it was paid for and was very expensive at the time for what we could afford, I took very good care of it. And to this day, I still have that same Atari 2600. Um, so I became um, also a victim of separation anxiety from my personal possessions, not only to financial relationships. I held on to everything. Um, I became very miserly. Not to the point where I wouldn't go out and buy new things, but buying things that I needed came first, and it over time, buying things that I wanted became less and less, and to the point where I didn't even think about things I wanted. Because at a certain point, how if you have a whole bunch of wants and never get that item or those wants fulfilled, you set yourself up for constant disappointment. So my wants became needs, and then needs became, as I got older and I took on the responsibilities of an adult, uh, my needs became more expensive, and the needs became, well, what does my family need? So, as I went through um, many years of um, menial blue collar jobs, I worked everything from packaging tool belts to loading UPS aircraft to stuffing envelopes, working in call centers. Uh, and eventually, I got my dream job of becoming a computer programmer. This was only a few years ago. Um, I had been programming computers since 1989, uh, and I got my software engineering degree from the University of Phoenix in 2010, and in 2015 I got my first job working for a large retailer, working on their handheld pricing guns. So, uh, did a few months of that. The contract wasn't very good, and they were having issues with funding that project. So after what was originally supposed to be a 6 month with the chance of extension, became 4 months, and we can't afford you anymore. So after working in the call center and then being off for about a year and a half, I got that job literally halfway across the country. I had been living alone. So basically, I was funding my house in uh, California and worked in Wisconsin, paying for an apartment. But at the same time, I was able to afford to pay for the mortgage, the household expenses back in California, my rent, my utilities, and my food, and to purchase some of the things I would need to live in Wisconsin. Because I couldn't take everything on, because literally I packed up the car, which was just a 4-door sedan, and drove across country and started living, with the intention that I was going to gain employment, which was experience that I didn't have. That's why it took from 2010 to 2015 to actually land a job. I basically had to take a contract job, and as I had been probably there for about 2 to 3 weeks. The money that I was saving, which I was able to save a couple of $1,000s a month. That's how little I was spending on myself, because I knew that once that job ended, I needed to have enough to live until I found my next job, no matter where that was going to be. And during the time of my unemployment, just before that job, my ex had been spending money. I had gained a little bit of money from when my mother had passed away. Her civil service retirement had a balance in it, so I was able to use that to keep my 2 kids and my household and my ex in our house, with the assistance of unemployment and state assistance for medical and for food. So I was very grateful for that. But during that time, my wife, or my ex, had gone on spending sprees. Um, she would go out uh, and take a trip back to see one of her high school friends. Um, and I was back at home taking care of the kids, um, taking care of the house, looking for jobs. And um, for example, um, $650, $700 for a full back tattoo was spent before talking to me about it. Now, at this time, I had the inheritance, if you want to call it, and I was upset. But I was made to believe that that was what she needed to be herself for her mental well-being. So I had to put my feelings aside and deal with that. Well, there was also times where she would purchase or play iPad apps and constantly be going through in upwards of $1,000 to $1,500 a month in microtransactions. And whenever these things happened, I would get upset. I might have yelled. But for the most part, I was just trying to get her to stop. But it became she would go through a period of self-harm. And it was a manipulation tactic. You're going to confront me for for what you believe is irresponsible spending, and I don't have a valid reason that other than I'm a little messed up. But in order to avoid confrontation, we would go through periods of self-harm and and in the course of, let's see, 4 to 5 years, we were in the emergency room 4 to 5 times. And so when you have someone that is willing to hurt themselves to avoid paying some restitution or to stop a bad habit, you sort of become trapped. Basically, you don't want to push that person over the edge because you don't know where they're going to stop. Well, I was under the impression that it was not a manipulation tactic, but I actually thought that the threat was real. And so I became very careful in how I approached things, But because I'm in a marriage, she had full access to the funds. She felt entitled to the funds. I was putting money in there and she was spending it. Then we had things like homeschooling costs. We have two children that she felt needed to be homeschooled, and we went from a free homeschool to one that all of a sudden required $2,000 to $3,000 for enrollment. Well, I had just been working and gotten my first couple of paychecks under my belt, and then all of a sudden I see this $3,000 withdrawal come out, and it wasn't discussed with me. So unilaterally, a person who is in a domestic partnership, if they take funds, especially in that amount, without discussing with their significant other, that's a huge red flag. Yes, you shouldn't have to account for every penny you spend, but you should also be able to be trusted with having access to the money and taking whatever you need and being responsible enough to take what you want, but leave enough in the account so that the other person has the ability to take what they need and they want. And there should be a plan for savings. In my case, there was never a plan for savings discussed. It was always one-sided decisions, and it got to a point in my relationship where I was going to work. This was my day. I would get a bologna and cheese sandwich for breakfast and a cup of coffee that I make at home. I take it to work. I spent money on gas getting to and from work. At work, I would take a TV dinner that was typically on sale. So $3-4 max for lunches. Then I would come home and we would spend some nights out of the week eating at home, but most of the time it was we bought food with intention of cooking it, but for some odd reason, my significant other, who was always home, just didn't want to cook most of the time. So we would eat out at fast food restaurants. And occasionally eat at, like once a week or once every 2 weeks out at something like Red Robin or um, Olive Garden. Nothing extravagant. Most of the time it was Red Robin, but maybe 3 or 4 times a year it was Olive Garden. But you get the point. Most of it was fast food. Well, fast food is not cheap food. So where I was saving money and earning it, I was bringing it home so that I could have someone tell me we're going to eat out. Okay. Well, I don't want to upset the person who was um, unstable, and it became a habit. Well, I finally said, you know what? My health isn't all that great. I'm middle aged. We need to have additional funds in the account in the event that I have to be out for any length of time before disability or unemployment or whatever kicks in. And so I set a minimum balance in the bank account for of approximately a little more than a month's worth of expenditures. Now, that amount was obtained fairly easily um, because I am a software engineer. And we hadn't gone on vacations. We didn't go out and buy new cars. We didn't have car payments. We only had utilities, food, and the mortgage to work with. So that was doable. I say doable. What I found was I should have been saving about $2,000 a month. When I started going through the books, I was finding my 2 children were enrolled in this and they were enrolled in that. And we were, for example, the school would have a book fair, and somehow $164 later, we had visited the book fair. Whenever I confronted her on why did you buy $164 worth of books, it became, you don't want the kids to have things to read and to do. And I would respond, but yes, I would, but a book fair, you buy $25 worth of books and you get maybe 2 or 3 books each. Or, what are you, you don't have to buy them everything. And then I started seeing things like a new phone had a payment plan on it, or um, the let's see, just giving some examples. I came home one day and there was a charge for a brand new computer, which I didn't think I needed. Um, and for example, when that computer was ordered, I asked, what was it for and why? And it became, well, I thought you needed it. And I asked, can it be sent back? Well, it was customized. Well, you just bought it on a new credit line. Um, Other things would be, oh, well, the kids want to see their grandparents in Southern California, and since we're in Seattle, uh, we'll have to buy plane tickets, or we'll have to drive, and it'll take 2 to 3 days to get there. So there'll be additional hotel rooms and gas. And I was left with all of these bills. Um, we will get to the medical bills in just a moment, but we would uh, we would purchase all of these travel expenses on a credit card that was taken out using my income, but I was not a signatory on the card. Uh, so 2 to 3 times a year, the children and her would go back to California to spend a couple of weeks at a time visiting her parents, while I continued to work, was expected to go to work every day because we weren't saving any money. And if I didn't work, I would lose money because um, I had been repeatedly put into a situation where my health had gone down the hill, um, and had to be hospitalized um, for a neck injury as well as a brain injury. I have hydrocephalus, and I had to have uh, a drain put in order to relieve some of the intracranial pressure. Well, those, and I also had cataract surgery in both eyes. So those costs um, piled up over a couple of years. It was basically, well, you got to take time off of work, and you have to use up all of your um, sick time and vacation time if you don't want to lose any money until the short-term disability kicks in. So I was constantly using up uh, that cushion, that benefit, so that I wouldn't lose any money. Well, because I didn't have any time off to take, and I didn't want to fall behind on the bills, because if you're just looking at the balance from week to week. I'm not even monitoring it day by day. And you see it's not going up, but it's not going down. It's hovering. You think, all right, I'm barely making it. Everything's good. I still have my cushion in there. And we'll deal with the bills as they come in. Well, it got to a point where the bills started not having enough money to pay them. Um, a medical bill went to collections, and by doing so, I was prevented from seeing certain doctors. I wanted to clear that up because I pay for the things that I need and use, while my wife would, or my ex, would rather buy new clothes, makeup, supernatural convention tickets, or new computers, or a new phone, or all of the little things that add up. And they weren't little ticket items either. Um, but it was always things that I couldn't enjoy. But the medical bills started um, becoming too much, and a couple of them went to collections. Well, one of them finally said, we're going to take you to court, and you're going to have to owe us over the course of 3 months to pay back $3,000. Well, I made an agreement to pay it in 3 installments. I made the first installment, and the very next month, I see that the balance had dropped down $1,000. So I'm thinking, all right, that last bill that I paid knocked us down, and if we continue to do this, I'll only have about a half of what my cushion is, but we'll at least be able to say we have paid a bill. I'll be able to hold my head high. I'll be able to go back to that doctor. And when it came to making the payment for that next installment, I noticed that not only was my previous payment down, but it was down another $500. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then I didn't make that payment for the second installment and the third installment, and we weren't saving any more money. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm to blame for this. Why, I'm not missing any work like I had the previous couple of years. So what are our additional expenses? And I went through our previous couple of months and found that $3,000 in 30 days had been withdrawn over without me even knowing it. But the balance was being meticulously kept at a level that would not be alarming. So it didn't matter how much money I put into the account, it was always going out at a specific rate. And it was the rate at which I was putting money into it. I noticed that there was creative accounting, is what I call it, where the monthly mortgage payment would be divided up amongst the biweekly paychecks in half monthly installments, which, you know, they do offer that as an option, but in my case, it was used to manipulate the spending so that she would know exactly how much she could take out to do to spend on herself. And the financial abuse is for this particular scenario is you don't take the other person into account when making financial decisions. You don't allow them to have a say in things like savings, and you take those funds as yours and yours alone. My ex thought that her Social Security disability was hers and hers alone. She would actually tell me, it's not yours. You can't tell me what to do with it. But she did the same thing with my paycheck and felt entitled to not only hers, but to control mine. She would do things such as make me believe that I was gaining a benefit from eating out. You know, you ate out too. You spent some of the money too by eating out. You could have cooked. Well, let's see. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, and I'm out the door by 5:30 to work at 6:30. And then I get off at 3 o'clock, and I'm home by like 4:35 because of traffic, and I have to come home and make my own dinner and clean up and do dishes, and I'm supposed to be happy with this. My ex was home all day long. It would actually be messier than when I left in the morning. If she had just cleaned up after herself, it would have been, I would have been able to keep up with it. So I was cleaning up after 2 children and an older child who didn't want to do housework, did not want to clean, did not want to make dinner, but a couple of nights a week. This was day after day after day after day. after I found out this $3,000 had been spent in 30 days, I had told her, call your mother. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. You go live with her. She took that as, I'm kicking you out and the children, and it became hostile. So she filed for divorce. Well, who was the victim here? I had been financially abused and manipulated and emotionally abused with suicide attempts, self-harm for years. I didn't have any control of the money. I didn't have any savings to call my own. I had student loans that I still had to pay off. And she decides that it's time for her to leave. But the kicker is, I got kicked out of the home that I had just purchased the year before. That's right. A brand new house. I commuted every day to make that a home for our family. And I get removed from the house because she lied in court, told the court that it was hostile, and that I could afford living separately. Now, that means that she basically said I could afford separate house payment, apartment, utilities for both, food for myself, gas, and I would have to pay to make sure that she could afford to take care of the kids. So I was kicked out, and she wanted me to only see the kids for 6 hours a week, because she said that I was an uninvolved father. When you spend the money so fast that I can't take a day off of work to attend parent-teacher conferences, school functions, because if I miss work, I lose money. I was also gaslighted into thinking that I was the one with mental problems, and I found that I was going to a therapist who basically just agreed with me all the time, because all I did was complain about how abused I was, and I didn't notice it. I had a therapist tell me, "Why are you still with her?" And I said, "She's the mother of my children." That's it. That was all that I had left. Because all I was seen as was a paycheck. I did not love this person because she didn't do anything family oriented. It was always buying the children gifts to make her the favorite. I was the victim of parental alienation while I was in the same house. But here's the really bad part. The state of Washington and uh, family court, they have two things on their minds. It doesn't matter about any other circumstance or condition. One, things are to be divided up equally. Doesn't matter what actually happened. You can't prove anything. You are considered a single entity, and if one person decides to just blow it all away and rack up debt, there's no consequence. The victim is blamed by saying, well, you now have half the debt and you have nothing left. That is the financial side of it. You can't actually sue a spouse for fraud. Essentially, you should be able to say, well, Your Honor, she was spending it. The only way I could have stopped her was to kill her. Because no court would say, no, you have to stop that. No therapist is going to say, well, it is what it is. You can't make someone do something they don't want to do. They aren't legally required to be a good person. Funny how we got married in a courtroom in front of a judge, took vows, and I hate to say this, but what's the point? Because they're not held up to any. You can lie in family court all you want, and there's no repercussions, period. Doesn't matter if you can prove it. But here's the other half of that coin. Because I was an uninvolved parent, that I was working all the time, doesn't matter why I was working. I didn't see the kids but in the evenings or on the weekends. That was all the court looks at. But here's the thing. She's home all day. She doesn't see the kids, but in the evenings and on weekends. But because she's present and able to take them to doctor's visits and be home when they're sick, that goes in her favor. Because the court, under temporary orders, at least here in the state of Washington, looks at, well, you are working outside of the home, so you aren't available, but she is. So we are going to side with custody based on not upsetting the schedule of the kids. Which is a bunch of hooey, but somebody who didn't have a backbone decided that that was the best thing for the kids. However, the family court, if you don't present information to the court to justify the custody, it's assumed the stay-at-home parent is going to be the primary custodian. Doesn't matter what the capacity of that person is. Are they able to care for themselves? Are they able to care for others? Do they have a mental history? All of these things are in the state statutes, but they don't look at them. They only look at what's best for the kids, what will upset them the least. All of those other things, mental capacity, ability to take care of children, all of those are in the statute, but they don't look at the whole picture. So where my ex had asked for only for me to see the kids 6 hours on a Saturday on a lie, I was given 25% custody. So that means that I was kicked out of the house because the girls would have to go to their school. They were already enrolled in school. So the primary parent gets to keep the house, and I have to go kick rocks. Do you think that that's fair? I'm the one who makes enough money to care for their needs, and if I'm not having to spend $2,000 to $3,000 extra a month, I can take up to 5 days a month without pay and still keep up with the bills. Do you see a problem with who has the ability to care for the kids and who gets kicked out? We have a parental travesty going on in the court system where they create parental alienation. I was kicked out. I was informed that I had to continue to pay the mortgage payment plus $500 towards utilities, and I have 25% custody. So in other words, for an extra, if it was 50-50, we'd both have the equal burden of the kids. But we had a court who said, I have to pay for all of the minimum payments on all of the credit cards. I had to pay for my um, student loan payment. I had to pay for all of the girls' medical installment payments, leaving me with about between $200 and $300 a month after all required bills were paid. That's right. I have $200 to $300 left for food, and I have 25% custody. I am losing money every month. But guess what? The financial abuse still continues. With all of the free rent that she's got, the free utilities, she can't afford to just basically have food and incidentals taken out of her Social Security disability. She's always running low, but here's the cream on this pie. She has been spending money obtained through personal loans and a payday loan and the credit cards, which aren't supposed to be used, and the court is looking the other way. And I'm being told, well, go to mediation, go to mediation. You're holding up mediation. I'm the one losing money every month. I will probably be without legal representation before trial. And you're violating the court orders every month. I was kicked out only 52 days ago. But she has run out of money, out of a payday loan, out of a personal loan, out of her Social Security disability. And on that thought of Social Security disability, let's just put it this way. The court sided with someone who's on disability. They aren't able to work. Why? Because they're unable. Now, I'm not on disability. I make money. I have the ability to be there for the kids. What part of this equation says, well, no, she still has, she's still what we would call a primary parent? It's ridiculous. I could afford afford childcare cheaper than I could my ex. And I would be a happy camper because the financial abuse also had an impact on me not wanting to go out and spend time with the kids on the weekend, because I was constantly like, I can't go to the zoo, or I couldn't go to the aquarium, or I couldn't go out and go bowling, or just little things, because the money would have disappeared every month. I felt trapped. So when you look at someone who says that they are in an abusive relationship and you don't see bruises or black eyes or casts, there is much more out there, and there is no shame. I want to tell everyone, if you see any of the signs of financial abuse, it is a form of domestic violence. If you're being withheld from access to money, credit cards, checkbooks, or other assets, if you're given a fixed allowance, or having to account for every dime spent. In my case, I was keeping my own account of every dime spent because I thought that I just wasn't making enough money. If they're sabotaging your job, if they're not allowing you to get training to get a better job, or if they're making you feel like a 40-hour-a-week job is just too much, they are the problem. You need to seek help. I want to implore everyone to write in the comments if you have any of the signs of financial abuse. I want you to know there's no shame in it. You need to get out of the relationship, because legally there is no recourse. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I am telling you it will be an uphill battle. Women typically have better chances at getting financial assistance. I will say this because I looked for legal assistance because I didn't have savings. I had enough to put down for a retainer, which is basically enough to file the initial response to the temporary orders. I am now looking for money on how I'm going to get through this nightmare. And there is no justice. Family court, it's not it's a court of equity, not a court of justice. That's one of the things that I have learned in this and the rules that apply in a court of justice do not apply. And I will tell you this from experience. Family lawyers are lawyers who can't cut it as criminal lawyers. Simple. Because they don't understand the rules that apply to a court of justice do not apply to a court of equity. Doesn't matter if you lie in court in a court of equity. It's whoever's story is more believable. And they don't care. They only want to divide it up with what is left. Well, at $300 an hour or more, an attorney is draining your pocket. If the rules of justice do not apply to family court, they should get paid half or less, because they're just taking your money. They're guiding you through this process. They don't give legal advice. All they want to do is have billable hours. And for example, mediation. Well, let's see, first we had temporary orders. I was not told, I was not informed or educated or counseled. They were my counsel. They should have said, you need to say this. You need to respond to every allegation that they put forth. If you don't, it is considered accepted truth. So in other words, if they give you 5 different sentences and you think I only have to answer one of them because all of them are related to each other, and you're basically saying, I don't agree, and this is the reason why, 4 of those sentences will be taken as fact. My counsel did not inform me of that. So when it came to, but the court didn't have anything to go on when temporary orders were presented. So my monthly income was based upon a net value divided by the number of months. Didn't matter whether or not I had a bonus this year. And of course, being in the job that I'm in, I am not going to get a bonus next year. So I can't count on having that same amount over the next year, divided by the number of months. So in court, they based my monthly net income and what I could afford on a fabricated lie. They lied in court that I made a certain amount of money. Because my attorney did not object, it was taken as fact. Was my attorney negligent? I would hope to hell so. Pardon my French. Because she was supposed to be there to defend me. But no, it's just going through the movements. They take your financial situation and they ask you, well, what do you want? What do you want out of this? By the end of the day, after being told that you aren't a good father, that you aren't worthy, and that all you're worth is an income, and that my ex declared war. I'm asked by my attorney, well, what do you want? What I want is for my ex, who cheated, who chose another person over me, to just leave. But that's not good enough. She wants to leave, have all the free time and fun she wants, and for me to continue paying for it for years, because she wanted primary custody. So I now will have to pay for years child support to ensure that my children have the life that I can provide, and she gets to choose how that money is spent. Yet she has chosen poorly up to this point, and nobody will pay any attention to that. She can't live on her own without going into debt. Even with the amount of money that I am being milked every month. I want to say one thing. Let's reverse the situation. Let me take care of the kids. And let me provide for them. And she just walks away. If spousal support is required, which spousal support is supposed to be for a push-off so that she could get a job because she hadn't been in the workforce for so long. Well, she doesn't intend to work ever. So she chose someone else over me, and I have to wait until she gets married or I retire for alimony or spousal support to cease. She is entitled to it. Is there something wrong with that? Especially with the fact that she was not a model housewife. And she emotionally checked out years ago. So we were just going through the motions after our children were born. But she couldn't wait another 10 years until both the children were out on their own. She could only hack it half the time. Just because I accepted to support her while she supposedly had a mental state, mental disability, I have to now be burdened with that possibly for the rest of my life. Is that fair? Is that equitable? If this is a court of equity and she racked up all of that debt and contributed nothing to the financial situation other than debt, and right now I walked out with just the clothes on my back, a TV, an Xbox, and my computers, and a few dishes and a table. Oh, and a bed. Okay, I'm starting over from scratch. But see, she has possession of 90% of our belongings. 80% of those are probably hers, but I don't even have access to the 10% that I could use. I had to buy a TV stand when there is one sitting in the living room. She would not allow me to retrieve any further stuff after I was court ordered out of the house. I had to request tools so I could fix my own door handle on my car for safety reasons. And she called the police when I showed up to just ask if she could hand me the tools so I could replace the part. She called the police. And when the police showed up, I'm just sitting in the driveway, sitting in the car, hadn't even gotten out because I would have had to have rolled down the window to get out of the car, because that's how much of a the door wouldn't open from the inside. I had been driving around like that for about 10 days. And I had asked her if I could pick up the tools, and she wouldn't answer. So when I finally said I'm coming over there and I would like to get them, I know exactly where they are, she didn't want me to see that the replacement person was living in my house rent-free with my kids. That's all. She wanted to use and abuse the system. And I didn't want this channel to become just another one of the cluster B terms, narcissist. But she is. She is controlling and manipulative. She has a psychological eval and history that is more than an inch thick. Yet the court thought that she was the better, more suitable parent. Needless to say, we are in a time where all you're going to hear about are the deadbeat dads who don't pay their child support. you have to ask, why can't they pay their child support? Because most likely the other parent got the possessions, and they're having additional costs thrust upon them just because the system is so screwed up. We have to have reform in family court. We have to get to a point where just the simple act of lying in court should be illegal and punishable, so that the lies don't continue. The court cannot do its job if the people are lying. So just a simple change in the laws that make perjury a crime in family court, we would be better off. So this has been a long rant, but what I will do going forward is, that was an introduction to what I'm going to talk about in this channel. And I think that over the course of the many weeks that I will be putting out much shorter videos, you will be able to rise up and take charge of your life. Already, I have had more quality time with my children just having 25% custody, but not being under the constant belittlement of my ex, telling me how and how not to parent, has been such a great weight lifted off of my shoulders. I wish that I could take the next step and lift the weight of the crushing debt and expenses that I am having to deal with. I have to tell my children that I can only afford to get them new bed frames and a couple of other things to get them up off the floor, because I don't have any extra money from month to month to get the basic needs. I have been here for almost 2 months, and my kids are sleeping on one twin full-size mattress on the floor, and the other sleeps on a 4-inch mattress, which she wakes up with sore and everything the next morning because it is too soft and it doesn't give any support. But I managed to spend a little bit of extra money this month. I didn't care whether or not I'm going further into debt. Actually, just further into having no money, because I am not buying anything on credit because I'm responsible. I don't understand. But my kids come first. If they're uncomfortable or there's a meal to be made, I'm going to make sure that they eat first, that they are comfortable at night to sleep. before I buy anything for myself. So I hope that this gives everyone a little bit of understanding as to what my situation is and my angle on how this how the information is going to be portrayed. Um, One might look at this and say it's bashing the other parent. I don't see it as that way because nothing that I have said here couldn't be proven with a stack of facts on paper. Um, if you don't want to be judged, don't do something that you could be judged for. If you don't want to be judged for spending money irresponsibly, don't. That's a simple fact of life. If you haven't learned that at the age of 30 or 40, you need to grow up. You need to get an adult to slap you over the head with a lesson. And if that is a law book, it's a law book. But darn it, you cannot continue to abuse someone over and over and over again just because you feel entitled to everything that you can grab, because that's what this was if it was there, it was hers. We bought a house. There was only one weekend that she did any yard work. And see, for a year, I was doing yard work every weekend. I was cleaning up the inside of the house. I was told, you have too high of standards. No, I was keeping up with your mess. You created the mess. I'm cleaning it up because it has to be cleaned up. The kids need to have a place to thrive. I didn't live in a perfect place. It was far from it. I couldn't keep up and do 4 or 5 hours worth of housework every night. I just couldn't. That's what it would have taken. And because of her controlling nature, when I did do cleaning after work or whatever, she would say that I'm making her uncomfortable, that I was being hostile because she was feeling guilty. It wasn't that I was throwing things around and making a lot of noise. It was, she knew that if I had to clean it up and it was her mess, it was her fault. Yet she never said, I'm sorry. or it was my fault, because it never is. And you'll find out that if you're in a financially abusive relationship and you it's just the tip of the iceberg. You will be you will be manipulated to the point where you are submissive. You will make excuses for this person because you can't believe that once there may have been some feelings there, but in my case, well, I will leave that for another video because this is a classic case of cluster B uh, um, DSM, and all I have to do is just run through the list of all of the manipulative tactics. So in the next video, I will explain what the signs are of financial abuse one by one, and then I will do videos on each one going into depth. So that should cover about the first 20 videos. So I'm going to try to put one of these out every 2 to 3 days. So that should cover us for about 2 months. And hopefully everyone will get some good information out of this. And I want to get people to talk about this in the comments section. And if you like this video, and this one's been a rant, a rambling, so I don't expect this to be the quality, but this was more sort of a getting to know me and some of my background. But subscribe, like this video. If you hate this video, give it a thumbs down. It doesn't matter. Tell your friends that a new down-to-earth channel is coming up that is going to take the approach of financial abuse under a narcissist and how to recover your life after this happens. So want to just wish everyone a happy holidays, and I will see you very, very soon. I hope to get to most, if not all, of the comments as they come in. Depending on how many come in, I might be able to get to all of them, and we'll have lively discussions. If we get a whole bunch of discussions, because I went over a lot of material in here, if I would like to have everyone comment on something about this video, whether it touched you, whether it scares you, or if you don't know where to go, or Maybe you know someone who this is happening to. Uh, give them my channel. Uh, I I want to be here to help everyone that is looking for help. We can only get through this together. If we stand together and be strong. And part of my uh, reason for doing this is because I want fair and equal treatment in our family courts. And since financial abuse is a form of domestic violence, because it is manipulative and controlling and keeps the abuser in a position of power over someone else, and financial abuse is theft. Let's just get that clear. And the courts are turning a blind eye. I want to get this out so that maybe we can change the laws and make financial abuse, like other forms of domestic violence, and the abusers should have to go to jail if it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They need to have jury trials. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys the next time.